Hi everyone, welcome to Communication and Conflict, promoting mindful communication, growth through conflict. And this is also a podcast under the name Chaos, which can be found on Apple Podcasts and Anchor.fm and various other platforms where you can hear podcasts. So today I want to look at quite a kind of an archetypal, I suppose you could say, journey that can often happen in difficult relationships or relationships which are struggling or proving to be challenging and maybe moving towards relationship breakdown or simply going separate ways. And I want to look at the kind of things that come into that kind of dynamic, and I'm putting it under this title, It's Not You, It's Me. No, actually it is you, and but really it just is. And I want to go through those kind of three stages that often happen, or often in fact it doesn't reach that third stage, and breakups occur or difficulties occur which can be quite challenging for people involved. So I want to look at what often seems to underlie the reason why it follows that journey, and as I say, sometimes doesn't get to that third stage of perhaps greater acceptance of simply difference in situations, um, and and look at why it actually manifests in various different contexts. It's usually related to kind of personal relationships, that kind of journey. It's not you, it's me. And then often it does become, no, actually it is you. um, but it's actually very common in workplace relationship breakdowns as well. And I was actually inspired to do this video and podcast based on a discussion I had recently with someone about a workplace difficulty. And it reminded me how common it can be that in the early stages of a workplace difficulty, we can often start by thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? Maybe it's me, maybe I'm missing something, maybe this is a situation that's down to me and I'm not doing my job properly, or maybe I'm not as competent as I thought I was, or maybe I'm losing competence at the job that I've been doing for the last 15 years, etc., etc. So it does start with that it's not you, it's me kind of basis. And I think the thing that I really want to explore here or highlight is how often in any kind of difficult situation we're looking to allocate cause and blame, and how that very impulse to do that is in itself one of the underlying reasons why conflicts, first of all, don't get responded to effectively, and they risk then escalating, but then they lead to a kind of a journey of different emotions. So quite often, when people say it's not you, it's me, they're looking at themselves and thinking, well, what am I doing wrong? What's my incapacity here? What's my failing? What's my flaw? What's my challenge that I'm not managing to meet? And then as they kind of continue to struggle with that allocation of cause, they then perhaps start to think, well, actually the times when I'm finding a difficulty is when the other person does something, does a particular thing, whatever that is, whether it's that they're in a personal relationship, and they realise that the times when things are feeling difficult for them, it's because their partner is doing something that they find challenging, and they have uncomfortable feelings as a consequence. Or it's in a workplace situation where perhaps a colleague or a boss, they realise that they feel those difficult feelings or they have those challenges when the boss or the colleague does something in particular, and so then it starts to switch from being it's not you, it's me, to no, actually it is you, it's you. uh, and so it switches, and sometimes when people have been through a lot of kind of soul searching and um, perhaps self even sometimes kind of self-loathing or kind of challenge about the fact that there's something they're finding difficult and they're thinking it must be about themselves, sometimes when they do start to kind of switch and say no, it's about the other person, they feel so much resentment because they've kind of been beating themselves up for so long about the problem. And then they start to decide that actually it's not them, it's the other person. No, actually it is you, it's you that's the problem. That then they actually have a lot of resentment about it and a lot of anger, and they perhaps even feel like they've been manipulated over this difficulty that they're having, when actually the other person's just, doing their daily thing, not having any plans to manipulate or control or upset the person. But the perception from the person who's feeling the difficulty is to first of all look to blame themselves or find cause of the difficulty in themselves. And then after a while, when they kind of can't work out where that's coming from, and they realize that actually it's when the other person does a particular thing that they feel that way, they then start saying the blame and the cause is in the other person. Um, and it's based on this kind of view that we can often default to, which says someone's got to be to blame, someone's got to be the cause of this problem. And so if there's a difficulty, it's got to be that someone's in the wrong and somebody else is suffering as a consequence of it. And when people have gone through this kind of initial phase of saying it's not you, it's me, and then they kind of decide that actually no, they're not doing anything wrong. So if someone's got to be wrong, if it's not me, then it's got to be you, that you're doing something wrong. And so then, as I say, sometimes when people have spent a period feeling very upset, very bewildered, very frustrated, very lost about the fact that a difficult situation or a difficult experience keeps arising, and then actually they decide, no, it's not me, it's you, then there's a lot of really challenging feelings come up about the kind of punishment that the person has imposed on themselves for all that time. And then they suddenly decide, well, I didn't need to be that punished, I didn't need to feel that bad, so it's all your fault, because really the problem is you. Um, and that kind of journey plays out in a lot of difficult situations, as I say, whether it's in a relationship, um, where something has changed in how things are between two people, which inevitably happens because life doesn't follow a kind of a mechanistic journey. Things happen in people's lives, things happen in people's views of the world, things happen in people's feelings, and so there's always constant change and fluctuation in how we have a relationship with another person and how we feel about it and how we perceive it. Um, and so if something starts to happen where there's a feeling of discomfort for whatever reason, because of suddenly the partner does something different, um, or because we're doing something different, or we're not getting the response that we hope for from our partner. And as I say, that can be just as true in a workplace relationship as well, that we're doing something in a particular way, or a certain change has happened in our role, or how we're carrying things out, or our duties have changed, or um, our method of going about something's changed. All sorts of things can change in either of those contexts, whether it's personal or workplace relationship. And as a consequence, we might feel some kind of level of discomfort over it, maybe just because it's new and things are different. But if we have those difficult feelings and then we think, oh, it must be me, because perhaps we're not fully confident in what we're doing, um, or how we're dealing with something, and we carry alongside that need to allocate cause to those difficult feelings as being either in me or in you, as if it's not actually a created interaction that we both create together, as if we're both part of it. And as I say, we look to identify cause. then we can suddenly switch and say, no, actually, it's you. You're the cause of my discomfort. You're the cause of my difficulty. Um, and it doesn't mean to say that the other person isn't doing something that we find difficult. Um, but it may not be that they're doing actually anything wrong. They just do things differently. Um, and and as a consequence, we want to kind of try to locate a cause for our difficult feeling over things. And so we say, it's you. You're the problem. Um, and if that then sort of comes out in things, um, then it leads to a difficult situation. And sometimes people can think that that must mean it's a broken relationship, it's the end of the relationship, um, uh, it's there's a difficulty which is beyond repair, um, because we then respond to it by saying, well, you've got to change back, or you've got to change, if not change back, you've got to stop being the cause of my discomfort in this situation. Um, and so it becomes a blame game. It becomes what I've called elsewhere a competitive response to conflict. So in a sense, in some ways, you could say that the "it's not you, it's me" aspect of things, if we think we've got to allocate cause somewhere, but we're not saying it's somebody else's fault, that's a bit more like the avoidance approach to conflict, which I've also talked about elsewhere, and I'll put links to, is one ineffective way of dealing with a difficult situation, because we're not actually dealing with the issue. We're dealing with we're seeing the problem as being in the other person or in ourselves in some way. Um, but then if we switch to, no, actually it is you, then that's starting to be the competitive approach to conflict, where I'm right and you're wrong. And again, what we're doing then is we're making it a personal issue about you and about me, as opposed to looking at the situation itself. Um, and so very often people don't, when it's become a difficult, broken relationship, they don't come to the place of recognizing that it's not about me specifically or about you specifically, and we can't locate it in either of us. It's about the interaction and the context within which we are creating our relationship and our communication. And so really, it just is. That's just the way things are. And it may mean that we choose to go different ways, but we can do it without it being about feeling that we just have to escape the negativity and the destructiveness of the other person. We might just realize, okay, that's the way you do things. This is the way I do things. It's not right for me, so it's time to move on. But sometimes it doesn't even need for there to be a moving on. It can be simply a recognition that on a temporary basis, there's a difficulty that exists in my feelings about a particular situation. Um, and I can look at, well, what do I need? What do I want for myself? How can I go about creating uh, a different way forward for myself, which isn't looking to blame either me or blame you, um, that can allow me to kind of stand back and look at just how things have gone, how things are, what's happening in my situation, um, and can allow me to come to terms with it and create something different. And that may mean moving on to a different place away from the person that I'm presently risking allocating blame to, or it might just mean that I just create a different situation for myself in the situation I'm already in the relationship I'm already in. And I've not had to base that change on blaming anyone. Um, so when I can get to that place where I accept that really it just is, um, I don't even have to have any kind of legacy from changes that I make that say I'm having to change because of you, or I'm having to change because of something wrong with me. It's just an acceptance that change happens, um, and that that's actually one of the opportunities that conflict or difficulties offer us, to be able to create something new for ourselves. But if we get distracted into blaming either ourselves or somebody else, then actually it doesn't provide, it distracts from that kind of creative opportunity that we have. Um, and and I've kind of also quoted on the video, and so I'll read it out for those people who are listening to the podcast, a phrase that Lao-Tzu uses in the Tao-te-ching in chapter 8, and he says, no fight, no blame. So if we don't have to fight over a change of situations, we don't have to fight over things, then we don't have to then blame people for what's happened. Um, and I haven't written this one up, but another one that I've heard said before, by somebody who I suppose could be described as a kind of spiritual teacher, and some of you may have heard of him, and probably other spiritual teachers have said this as well, but the one I heard say it is a guy called Mooji, Mooji, and he said that things don't happen to us, they just happen. And in many situations we could look at the fact that things have just happened, but we've perceived it as being something being done to us, as if it was deliberate and malicious. And in the journey of it's not you, it's me, and then a belief that no, actually it is you, people can often come through those two stages and think that actually really that person was being nasty to me all the time, and I thought it was me, and actually they were being very manipulative, and they made me think it was all my fault when actually it wasn't, it was all their fault. And actually at the end of the day the person hasn't done any of that, they've just done their thing on a daily basis. But because we've felt we've got to kind of initially take the blame for something, and then we've realised that actually the other person's actions or words have an influence on how we feel about that thing, we've then started saying, well actually no, they did it, it's all their fault. Well actually it's no one's fault, it's just the way things have gone, just things that have changed, things that have happened. And we've looked to try to focus on allocating blame rather than simply noticing a difficult situation has arisen and looking at, well, what can I do given that I find this situation to be difficult? What can I do for me, rather than focus on trying to blame someone else for it? Now, again, as I say, sometimes people might hear these things and say, oh, it's all too wishy-washy, woo-woo, touchy-feely, etc. I'm not saying that if someone's broken a law or broken a conduct expectation and it's all officially outlined, we've got every right to challenge things on that basis. But most unresolved conflict is over things that are not defined in law, they're not defined by guidelines, they're just how we perceive and interact with another person or other persons. And we're never going to get anybody else to agree with us that that other person's in the wrong. Well, we might get friends too, who kind of, perhaps will always say what they think we want to hear, but we won't get anybody official to accept that the other person's done anything wrong, unless it really is an official thing, which again I've talked about a lot around the ideas of bullying and harassment. But in a lot of relationship conflicts, no one's done anything wrong. It's just different. It's just we've seen things and done things differently, and people change. And what our partner might have been like 2 years ago, they might have changed in a certain way such that they're not like that now. So is it that we have to say they're wrong, they shouldn't have changed? Or can we look at, well, okay, they've changed, or something's changed in our relationship. What do I need to do for myself to accommodate that? Because that is how things are. That's the reality of it. But really, it just is. So what can I do to support myself with the fact that that change has seemed to happen? Uh, and of course, it will always be that there's a change in both of us, but we may only be noticing what we think is a change in the other person, because everything's moving all the time. My own life will change such that I will act differently. That might mean that how I see my partner's behavior looks different from where I am now. My own actions, if they've changed, might have led to my partner changing in how they respond to me, but I might only notice their changes rather than acknowledge that perhaps their change has occurred due to something that I've done. So it's like a dance that moves all the time. But if we think we're fixed and the other person, whether it's our work colleague or our partner, has changed and it's in a way that we're struggling with, we're finding uncomfortable, then it's like we're looking to allocate blame rather than return to the dance of movement in how we're going to adjust life to fit with those continuously changing circumstances and relationships. So it's not you, it's me. No, actually it is you. But really, it just is. It just is. Things change. Can we look at what's changed? Acknowledge that I'm as much a part of what's changed as anybody else is. And if I'm finding it difficult, can I look at what I can do to support myself with the fact that I find it difficult? Because there will always be ways that I can support myself if I'm finding it difficult. But if my energy goes into blame, I won't be putting energy into supporting myself. My energy will be going into blame and attack against the denial of blame, and the demonization of the other person, and it won't be going into what can I do to support myself because of whatever has happened that has led to that change. So they're my thoughts on that little archetypal journey that, as I say, I described, that often it doesn't reach that third stage where we just accept, well, that's what's happened, so what do I need to do now? Sometimes in unresolved conflict situations it gets stuck at, no, actually it's you, it's all your fault, you are the cause of my difficulty, even though at first I thought it was me. Then I saw through your manipulations and machinations that you were getting me to feel guilty, when actually the person wasn't doing anything of the kind. They were just doing their thing, just being who they are. And it was all a kind of story I was telling myself, and really it just is. And so what can I do that finds that place of peace within myself, that means, okay, things have changed, what can I now do to support myself given that change? And that could be anything. It could be that I do decide to leave a situation, or it could be that I'm able to adapt and adjust and support myself to stay in the situation and learn from it. So, again, please let me know your thoughts about this. Please put your questions or comments in the section below. Please share this with anybody you think might be interested in this, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the podcast, and please also give a rating on the podcast if you like this, and I hope you join me again soon with more of my kind of considerations on conflict resolution and effective communication, which are based on my observations of such things as a mediator and a conflict coach. I hope you have a good day. Thanks very much for listening. Thanks very much for watching. Bye bye.